What would you do if you shared a shelter on the Appalachian Trail with a stranger and woke to find him lying awake, just staring at you? That's what happened to me one night in North Carolina, and to this day, and I still don't know if I walked away from something much worse. This was back in 2019. I've been hiking southbound for around 3 weeks, alone. I wasn't new to the AT, but I was still learning to deal with the loneliness. Most nights I camped by myself or with 1 or 2 others at the 3-sided wooden shelters that dot the trail. One evening, after a long rainy day, I reached a shelter just before dark. It was empty. I set up inside, spread out my sleeping pad, and made dinner. I remember feeling relieved to have a roof over my head, dry wood, dry gear, no need to pitch the tent in mud. Just as I was climbing into my bag, I heard footsteps. Someone else was coming. An older man stepped out of the trees, grey beard, worn jacket, heavy pack. He didn't say much, just nodded once and dropped his stuff at the far end of the shelter. "Evening," I offered. He grunted something back. He didn't cook, didn't hang food, just lay down on his side facing me, eyes open. I figured he was exhausted, but something about him felt off. You see, most hikers swap stories, trail names, tips, but this guy didn't ask or offer anything, just silence. I tried to ignore it and just force myself to sleep. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up, no idea why. The rain had stopped, the forest was dead quiet, and the man, he was wide awake. He hadn't moved since lying down, same position, same side, but his eyes were wide open, locked directly on me. I froze, pretending to still be asleep, barely breathing, but that's when I heard it. A faint scraping sound, metal on wood. Very slowly, it was dragging something against the wall beside me, back and forth, over and over. I couldn't see what it was in the dark, but every hair on my body stood on end. I forced myself not to move, not to react. I just lay there for what felt like an hour, listening to that scrape. Eventually, at some point, I drifted off out of sheer exhaustion. When I woke up at first light, he was gone. His pack was missing, no trace he'd been there. But when I looked at the wall where he'd been lying, I saw it, a deep gouge carved into the wood. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, a knife mark inches from where my head had been, and below it, fresh in the shelter logbook, one line written in shaky handwriting: "Don't stay here again." I left that shelter fast, hiked nearly 20 miles the next day just to get away. Later, I asked other hikers if they'd seen a bearded older man in a worn jacket. Nobody had. His name wasn't in any other shelter logs. I still think about that scrape at night, how long he just lay there, awake, watching me, dragging that blade back and forth against the wood. And I wonder, if I opened my eyes, if I'd moved, if I made a sound, would he have carved deeper? What would you do if you noticed the same man following you for days on the trail, never speaking, never passing, just keeping pace? That's what happened to me and my friend on the Appalachian Trail in 2017. And to this day, I have no idea who he was or what he wanted. It was my first serious backpacking trip, a 2-week section hike in Virginia. My buddy Eric and I had trained for months. We weren't through hikers, but we knew the basics: miles per day, where the shelters were, when to resupply. The first few days were perfect. Blue Ridge views, good weather, logbook jokes at the shelter. Would meet other hikers, chat, then pass each other or leave them behind. But around day 4, we noticed him. He was standing around 100 yards down the trail when we stopped for lunch. Middle-aged, maybe 50, dark jacket, old external frame pack. He didn't wave back when we waved, he just stood there. When we shouldered our packs and started walking, he started too, always behind us. At first we laughed about it. Trail shadow, Eric called him. Some people hike slow, no big deal. But the pattern got weirder. Every time we stopped for water, he stopped. When we ate dinner at a shelter, we saw his fire down the hill, always visible, never close. The one time we slowed down, thinking maybe he'll pass us, he slowed down too, always keeping the same distance, like he was tethered. The 4th night was when it started to feel wrong. We were camped a mile short of a shelter, tucked just off trail. Around midnight, I woke to footsteps, crunching leaves, slow, circling. I whispered Eric's name. He was awake too. We lay frozen, knives in hand, listened as someone walked a full circle around the tent. Then, silence. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next day, nerves shot, we decided to push hard. 15 miles instead of 10, to shake him. We kept glancing back, half expecting to see him. Hours passed, no sign. By dusk, we relaxed, set up a shelter, even laughed at ourselves for being paranoid. Then, as we wrote in the logbook, I noticed the last entry was only an hour old, scrawled in shaky handwriting. 2 boys ahead. I'll catch up soon. I showed Eric, his face drained. We didn't cook that night. We didn't even unroll our bags. We packed up by headlamp and kept walking into the dark until our legs gave out. 2 days later, we told a ridge runner, kind of like trail security, about the man. She flipped through her notebook and frowned. According to the register logs, no one had signed in ahead of us for nearly a week. And behind us, only one guy, a section hiker who'd bailed in town 3 days earlier. "Are you sure it was him?" she asked. I wanted to say yes, but the truth is, I wasn't sure anymore. We never saw his face clearly, never heard his voice, just the pack, the jacket, the fire in the distance. We bailed early, hitched to town and ended the trip. It wasn't worth finding out what he wanted, but here's the detail that still makes my stomach turn. A month later, back home, I checked the AT section hiker forums. One post caught my eye. "Anyone else notice a man who won't pass you? Dark jacket, old pack, keeps pace but never talks. We called him the Shadow. Happened near Roanoke." The post was from 2014, 3 years before our trip, and it described the exact same man. What would you do if you were camping alone on the Appalachian Trail and sometime after midnight, a child's voice started calling, "Mum?" from the trees, over and over, never closer, never further, until it copied your words back at you? That happened to me in Virginia, south of McAfee Knob. I still don't know if it was an animal, a person, or something I should have never acknowledged. This was late fall 2022. I was section hiking solo, 3 nights between known shelters, plenty of day hikers in the afternoons, dead quiet by evening. I had the usual setup, 1-person tent, bare hang, headlamp I always forgot to charge until it blinks red. I reached a legal camp spot just off the trail around dusk, flat ground, a good limb for a hang. and enough deadfall that I didn't need to wander far for kindling. I boiled water, ate a bag of something that claimed to be stroganoff, wrote in the little shelter log I carried. It was a habit, and then I just zipped in by 9:30. Wind in the canopy, distant highway hum, a barreled owl somewhere working through its who cooks for you bit. I fell asleep fast. When I woke for the first time, it wasn't to a branch snap or animal noise on the horizon. It was a voice, small, clear, from the dark line of trees 30 yards downhill. "Mum?" I didn't move at first. Kids do hike this trail with families, school age, tiny trail names sharpened on their caps. Maybe a family had rolled in and the group split while setting up camp. The voice came again, same pitch, same distance. "Mum?" I checked my watch, 12:41 a.m. I lay still and listened for things you expect with a child. A grown-up voice answering, tent zippers, clumsy footsteps, laughter, even the slap of a flip-flop. There was nothing but wind. "Mum?" Exactly the same. Same vowel length, same tiny catch before the M, like a recording. I slid my hand to my headlamp, keeping the beam off. "Hello?" I said, not much louder than a whisper. "Do you need help?" Silence, a long one. I felt the space fill with all the wrong possibilities. Someone hurt, someone lost, someone using a child's voice because they know people like me will come. Then, from the trees, the voice again, same tone. "Mum?" I stayed put. I told myself I would not leave the tent on a guess. "Where are you?" I called. "I can call for help." Leaves trembled high up. A minute passed. Then, "Mum?" Exactly the same. And here's the detail that still makes no sense. The sound didn't move. It didn't echo the way the ridge usually throws voices around. It felt pinned in one place, like a small speaker hidden behind a trunk. I unzipped 2 inches and let in cold air. The woods were ordinary dark, not movie dark. My breath fogged. I kept the headlamp off because light makes you visible before it helps you see. I listened hard enough my ears ached. "Mum?" It had been maybe 5 minutes since the first call. No crying, no panic, no change. The exact same shape of the sound. I decided on the middle ground. I wouldn't go down the slope, but I'll make noise big enough to wake anyone close. I took my bare whistle and gave it 3 sharp blasts. The sound rippled the silence to shreds and died. I waited. "Mum?" I turned on the headlamp and shot the beam into the trees. Slow sweep left to right. The way a ridge run had showed me, don't whip it, glide so you can catch eye shine on the backswing. Halfway through the second pass, something flashed. A low pair, not high like a deer, then gone. A raccoon maybe? The beam bounced off pale bark, spider silk, a curl of fog. "Hey!" I shouted towards the voice. "I'm up here. Tell me where you are." Silence. Then, from the same spot, not loud, not whispering, just that same steady tone. "Are you okay?" It was my sentence, my cadence, my voice, but thin and too clean, fed back wrong. Every hair on my arm rose. I killed the light. I zipped the tent. I took the knife out of my pocket where it lives and set it beside my thigh. Face to the tree line, ears straining for footsteps. For the next hour, the voice took long breaks and then returned to that first word. "Mum?" Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20, never closer, never further. The wind picked up and laid back down. The owl went quiet. I watched the little glowworm of my watch crawl from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. At 2:07, something changed. Not the voice, the woods. Everything held its breath. No wind, no highway hiss, no branch tick. A stillness so complete my own heartbeat felt loud. I reached for my phone and typed 911 without hitting call. The rational part of my brain was still bargaining. Kid, lost, hypothermia. The other part pictured a man with a speaker and a mask waiting for a light or footfall. I forced myself to do the smartest thing I could think of. I texted my location to a friend with the little bit of signal I had saved from airplane mode. Then I typed out a note in my phone. Time, sound, my exact coordinates. So if I did something stupid, someone would know where to start. Then I lay there and did nothing. Doing nothing is harder than it sounds when everything in your body is screaming to fix it. At 2:31, without warning, the voice moved, not towards me, around me, same distance, but now to the left, then to the right, then behind, like whatever it was had circled without making a footstep. Mum? My chest felt packed with ice. I wrapped my fist around the knife handle and said out loud, low and flat, "If you come into my camp, I will defend myself." Silence held. A leaf ticked, a twig let go somewhere. I heard something small, maybe a vole, scurry under leaves. The workaday noises of normal woods returned, like someone had just turned the world's volume back up a notch. And then, so close it felt whispered past the rain fly, "Are you okay?" My words, right at the wall. I didn't make a sound. I didn't breathe like a person. I let the moment pass like a bad current and I didn't grab it. I counted to 100, twice, 3 times. Nothing else came. At some point, I slept the stupid, absolute sleep of an animal that runs out of options. Morning was regular. Frost film on the fly, pale ribbon of cloud in the east, a squirrel dropping something on the ground like it owned the place. For 5 minutes I convinced myself I had a long dream with weather in it. Then I saw the prints. Not boot prints, not bare human feet. Small pads, 5 little toes. Hand shapes too if you squinted. Raccoon tracks, a dozen of them. A mess. Raccoons do mimic. That's a thing people claim, right? Coyotes too, sometimes. I clung hard to the most boring explanation. It's how you get through. Except the cluster wasn't random. From the edge of my camp to the tent, they came in a diffuse fan. Around the tent, they ringed the perimeter in a tight, even circle, as if someone had paced in the same track for minutes. And directly next to my vestibule, the leaves were pressed flat like a knee had rested there for a while. I packed fast. I didn't cook. I ate a bar with the wrapper still half on, slung a cold pack on my back, and I didn't look behind me. 3 miles down trail, I reached a shelter with a couple overnighters making oatmeal. I poured out the short version. The older guy nodded too quickly. "You heard the kid, huh?" he said. "What kid?" I asked. He shrugged with his mouth. "Happens round here some nights. Folks talk. Could be coyotes, could be bored locals screwing with hikers." He stirred his pot. "Ridge Runner told me one rule. Don't follow voices off trail. Rule 2. Don't give your voice back to anything you can't see." I wanted him to be joking. He wasn't. His wife handed me a cup of coffee without meeting my eyes. Later, in town, the outfitter clapped his hands and said it was a fox, or owls, or me. Mostly me. I wanted him to be right. A ranger at the desk made a note and said, "We'll keep an ear out. It's been a quiet week." That night in the cheap room, I searched animal mimicry Appalachian Trail until the battery died and my brain ran in circles so small I forgot how to stand. A week after I got home, a priority envelope showed up with no return address. Inside was a photocopy of an old typed page. that looked like it had lived in a binder for decades. Incident report, the header said, and under it, Blue Ridge Parkway, 1978. The middle was blacked out. The last line was clear. Subject says it called to her in the exact voice she used when she called to it. No names, no context, just that sentence. I don't know who sent it. I don't know if it was a joke. I fold it back up and pull it in the map pocket of my pack I haven't used since. If you ever hear a child's voice on the AT in the middle of the night and there's no tent light, no adult answer, no zipper, no footsteps, don't go looking. Don't shine your light to give yourself away. And whatever it says, don't give it your voice back, because some things out there carry sound better than the wind does, and some nights the woods repeat you, so you'll move first. My name is Sarah, and I've always been drawn to the hidden corners of the world, especially places steeped in folklore. That's what brought me to the Appalachians, the old logging trails, the forgotten hollers, the whispers of ancient myths. One legend I heard was about Black-Eyed Ben, a cursed hermit said to roam these very mountains. They said he couldn't speak, but he could mimic any sound he had ever heard. A spooky campfire tale, I thought, perfect for a long solo hike. The day started out clear. I set off on a lesser used trail, camera in hand, eager to capture the rugged beauty. I hummed an old folk song my grandmother used to sing, stopping now and then to take pictures of moss-covered rocks and towering pines. As the afternoon wore on, the sky grew overcast and a thick, oppressive silence fell over the woods. I realised I'd wandered off on my marked path. My phone had no signal. Panic started to set in. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same. The sun was dipping below the ridge, painting the sky in bruised purples and greys. And that's when I heard it. A snapping twig. It was faint, just beyond the tree line, but distinct. I froze, listening. Then, a crow's call, sharp and clear. I thought nothing of it at first, wildlife. But a minute later, from the same direction, came a low, mournful hoot, a perfect imitation of an owl I heard earlier that morning. My blood ran cold. I started walking faster, trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that my mind was playing tricks. I heard a distant car horn, a faint, almost ghostly honk from behind me. No cars could get out here. Then, a few seconds later, the sound of my own humming, the old folk song my grandmother used to sing. It was distorted, echoing, but unmistakably my voice, echoing back to me from the deepening gloom of the forest. I broke into a run, my heart hammering against my ribs. The woods were growing darker, the trees blurring into walls. The sounds pursued me, gaining speed. The rustle of leaves, a small animal shriek, the muffled thud of my own panicked footsteps, all perfectly mimicked, getting closer, closer. I stumbled upon a small cave, more of an overhang really. It was nestled into the side of a rocky bluff. I scrambled inside, pressing myself against the damp stone, trying to control my ragged breathing. I pulled my knees to my chest, covering my mouth with my hand, praying it hadn't seen me. The sounds outside were silent, the woods were utterly still. The silence stretched, vast and terrifying, what felt like an eternity. I thought, I'm safe, it's gone. Then, from the darkness just beyond the cave's opening, clear as a bell, came my grandmother's voice. It was soft, reedy, exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. Sarah, my sweet girl, are you there? Come out, darling, it's getting cold. Please, come out. It was perfect. The inflection, the slight tremor in her voice, the loving tone. My grandmother, who has been dead for 10 years. My mind screamed in protest, but my body wanted to obey. It was the most comforting, familiar sound, yet the most horrifying thing I have ever heard. I pressed my face into my knees, tears streaming down my cheeks, squeezed my eyes shut, just trying to block out the impossible, terrifying mimicry. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to my dead grandmother's plead for me to come out, knowing that if I did, I would never hear another sound again. I don't know how long it lasted, but I stayed there until the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, and the voice finally faded. I ran until I found the road. I never went back to those woods, and now, sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear a faint, distorted echo of my own voice, whispering my name, just at the edge of hearing. It's a reminder that Ben isn't just a legend. He heard me, he knows me, and he's still out there. My name is Daniel, and for the past 4 months, I've been living in Fire Watchtower 7, deep in the Monongahela National Forest. It was just me, the tower, and miles of uninterrupted Appalachian wilderness. The isolation was the draw, a clean break from the world, a chance to clear my head. My only contact was a crackling radio, and the nearest town was a good 4-hour drive away. It was peaceful at first, the vast green canopy, the crisp mountain air, the satisfaction of a job well done. But as the weeks bled into months, the solitude started to feel less like freedom and more like exposure. The first oddity was the smell of smoke. It would come and go, faint at first, then strong enough to make my eyes water, even on days when the forest was damp and there hadn't been lightning striking weeks. It was a sweet, acrid smell, like burning leaves and something else, something sickly. I'd scan the horizon with my binoculars, check my maps, but there was never a plume, never a source. Then came the figures, small, carefully constructed twig effigies. They started appearing on the bottom step of my tower, then on the landing, then right outside my door. They were crude, like stick figures, but they always had a distinct, unsettling head, a piece of bark or a knotted root. I'd toss them into the woods, thinking it was just some local kids trying to play a prank, but the next morning there'd be another, sometimes 2, waiting for me, always facing into the tower. The radio, my only lifeline, began to act up. It would emit strange, non-human sounds, a series of clicks and static that wasn't just interference. It sounded almost deliberate, like a garbled, broken language. I couldn't get a clear signal out. I couldn't call for help. I was cut off. The smell of smoke intensified, constant now, clinging to my clothes, permeating the very air of the tower. I saw movements at the edge of my vision, shadows flitting between trees, just beyond the reach of my binoculars. I'd dismissed them as deers, bears, anything but what my gut told me they were. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, I saw a flicker in the distance, a small fire, then another, further out, and another. They weren't random. They were slowly but surely forming a perfect circle, surrounding my tower. They were growing, creeping closer with an unnerving precision. It was deliberate. Someone was setting them. I grabbed my binoculars, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them steady. I scanned the tree line, searching for an arsonist, and then I saw them. Shadowy figures, human-like but not quite. They moved with a strange, fluid grace, tending the fires, feeding them with dry branches. Their bodies seemed to shimmer in the heat, their faces obscured by the smoke in the distance. They weren't there to burn the forest down. They were there to trap something, to contain it, and I was inside their circle. The fires grew, smoke thick and choking, blotting out the stars. The heat was immense. Even from inside the tower, I could hear the crackling, the roar, and the frantic skittering of animals fleeing the inferno. But the figures outside remained calm, methodical, completing their circle. And then, through the smoke, I saw one of them look up, directly at my tower, its head tilted, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its gaze, a heavy, ancient presence that saw right through me. It wasn't setting a fire to destroy, it was building a wall of fire, to keep something in, or to keep something out, and I was caught in the middle. I don't know how long I stayed in that tower, watching the ring of fire close in, watching the silent, shadowy figures tend their horrifying fence. I don't know how I survived. I just remember the smoke, the heat, and the terrible realization that the purpose of this fire was not destruction, but containment. I eventually found my way out, half crawling, half stumbling through the burnt out shell of the forest, the acrid smell of smoke forever in my nostrils. They found me weeks later, babbling, incoherent. They said I suffered from smoke inhalation and severe dehydration, that the isolation had played tricks on my mind. Well, I know what I saw, and sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I still smell that sweet, sickening smoke. I know the fires weren't meant for me, they were meant for something else, and I just happened to be in the way of whatever they were trying to keep in, or to keep out. And I still wonder, what was so terrifying that it needed a wall of fire to contain it? My name is Kevin. My wife, Lisa, and I brought our place deep in the Appalachian woods to escape. We were sick of the city, the noise, the suffocating pace. The ad called it a unique off-grid homestead. It was a beautiful, isolated property with an old log cabin, acres of untouched woods, and a profound silence that we thought was exactly what we needed. The realtor, a local with tired look in his eyes, gave us a passing comment about the small, overgrown cemetery plot in the backyard. Old family plot for a family that went bad, he said with a shrug, then quickly changed the subject. We thought nothing of it. We thought it was charming. The first few weeks were perfect. We started a garden, fixed up the old cabin, and revelled in our new life, simple life. The only oddity was the graveyard. It wasn't marked with names, just with crude, uncarved field stones jutting out of the earth like broken teeth. We left it alone, a silent, cautious part of our property. Then we started hearing the sounds, faint at first, a rhythmic scraping and digging that seemed to come from the direction of the cemetery, but only at night. We told ourselves it was just animals, a badger or a fox, but the sounds were too deliberate, too consistent, like a shovel hitting rock. Our old dog, Buster, he started acting strange too. He'll stand at the edge of the woods, his hackles raised, barking frantically at the ground in a cemetery plot. He would whine and refuse to go near that part of the yard. The digging sound grew louder, more frantic. One night, a thick, putrid fog rolled in from a direction of the cemetery, so dense and sickly sweet it smelled of rotting leaves and damp earth. It clung to the house, settling in every nook and cranny. We heard a loud thud on our porch. Lisa screamed, and we both froze, listening. We heard the sound of heavy footsteps, then the scrape of something being dragged away. When we checked, there was nothing on the porch, but a single, ancient-looking lantern sat on the doormat. Its glass was shattered, and its handle was coated in dark, sticky substance that smelled of rust and something else I couldn't place. We ran back inside, locking the doors and windows. The scratching and digging sound started again, even louder now, coming from the woods all around the house. It was not just one sound, but dozens. We could hear the rhythmic thud of a shovel hitting dirt, the groan of wood, and the chilling, slow dragging of something heavy. The next morning, the fog was gone, and the sun was shining. The world looked normal again. We decided to pack up and get out of there. We walked to the backyard to get our dog, and that's when we saw it. Buster was whimpering, huddled by the back door, and his eyes were wide with terror. The cemetery plot was no longer small. A new row of fresh, disturbed earth led from the edge of the woods, and in the middle of it was a new, uncarved fieldstone. It was a perfect match for the others. The number of stones had increased by 1. We stared at it, speechless. The family hadn't gone bad, they had been taken. The digging we heard wasn't animals, it was them, or something else, creating a new plot, a new grave. And the lantern was a warning, a message. We left that day, leaving everything behind. We never looked back, but I can't shake the image of that new stone, fresh and raw, sitting in that old, cursed cemetery. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is silent, I swear I can hear the distant, methodical sound of a shovel hitting dirt, and I wonder what new grave is being prepared. They called him Lying Randall, a quiet, peculiar man from Pearisburg, Virginia, a small town with quiet streets and long memories. To most folks, Randall Lee Smith was just a drifter, a loner who wandered the Appalachian Trail for days at a time, sometimes vanishing for weeks. He would show up again thin, sunburned, smiling like nothing ever happened. He was strange, sure, but not dangerous. That's what they thought. Until the spring of 1981. 2 social workers from Maine, Susan Ramsey and Robert Mountford, were hiking the Appalachian Trail to raise money for mental health charities. It was a noble journey through one of the most beautiful yet unforgiving regions of America. They were last seen near the Wapiti shelter, a small, rustic lean-to deep in the woods, a place meant to offer rest, safety, but on that night, it became something else entirely. When Susan and Robert failed to show up to meet fellow hiker as planned, the alarm was raised. Deputies combed the trail. At first, nothing, just endless trees and silence. Then they found it. A bloodstain on the shelter's floorboards, a disturbed patch of leaves, a buried sleeping bag. Inside was the body of Susan Ramsey, stabbed, beaten, her final moments hidden beneath the very soil she hiked to inspire hope. Nearby, they found Robert Mountford, a single gunshot to the head, executed. And near their graves, a paperback book. Inside the book, fingerprints that didn't belong to either victim. They belonged to Randall Lee Smith. Police raided his home in Pearisburg. What they found chilled them to the bone. Bloody clothes, stolen items from victims, disturbing homemade instruments, and a handwritten note claiming he had been kidnapped. The handwriting matched his own, but Randall was already gone, vanished into the Appalachian wilderness he knew better than anyone else. Weeks passed, then months, until, by eerie coincidence, the lead investigator, Sheriff Tom Lawson, got a call while vacationing hundreds of miles away on Myrtle Beach. A man had been picked up wandering the streets, covered in bug bites, disorientated. He said he didn't know his name, said he had amnesia, but when they handed him a form to sign for medical treatment, he wrote, Randall Lee Smith. He was brought back to Virginia in shackles, but despite the brutality of his crimes, Randall never faced the death penalty. He took a plea deal, 30 years in prison. He served half, 15. Then in 1996, he walked free. A convicted double murderer released in the very same town where his victims had once hiked in peace. Locals avoided him, hikers whispered his name in fear, but Randall, he went back to the trail, back to the woods. Some said they saw him talking to campers, smiling, polite. No one recognized the danger. Time passed, people forgot, but the mountain didn't. May 2008, 2 fishermen, Scott Johnson and Sean Farmer, were both camping near Bushy Mountain, just a couple of guys sharing trout and beer in the heart of the forest. That's when a man emerged from the trees. Thin, pale, accompanied by a starving dog. He called himself Ricky Williams, claimed he was a NASA scientist, married to a beauty queen, said he'd been lost in the woods for weeks. Scott and Sean knew he was lying, but in the Appalachian tradition, they offered him a meal, a place by the fire, a bit of kindness. He ate in silence, then stood to leave, and then he turned and opened fire. 4 shots. Sean took one to the head, Scott in the neck, then Sean again in the chest, Scott in the back. Somehow they ran, stumbling, bleeding, vanishing into the dark woods as Randall watched from the edge of the firelight. But the killer had made a mistake. He was out of bullets. Sean reached his truck, drove with a bullet in his skull, found Scott on the road, who'd somehow survived too. They reached the farmhouse, hammered on the door. A woman inside screamed for her son to call 911. When the police arrived, one of the young men, still bleeding, barely conscious, pointed to a missing poster. "It's him," he whispered. "That's the man who shot us, Randall Lee Smith." Hours later, a Virginia state trooper spotted Scott's stolen truck speeding down a mountain road. It crashed, flipped. Randall was inside, unconscious, trapped, his pistol just out of reach. He was taken to the same hospital as the 2 men he tried to murder. When he woke, he claimed self-defense. Of course, no one believed him. A few days later, a corrections officer brought Randall his dinner tray. He didn't respond. They found him collapsed on the floor of his cell. No injuries, no wounds, no signs of struggle. Randall Lee Smith, a man who had killed without reason, without remorse, had simply stopped living. Some say it was natural causes, others say he lost the will to exist once the thrill of hunting was gone. He was buried next to his mother. The only soul to attend the graveside service was his dog, Lou. But what's truly horrifying about Randall Lee Smith isn't what he did, it's why he did it. There was no motive, no robbery, no grudge. The hikers he killed in 1981? Strangers. The fishermen in 2008? They fed him, showed him kindness, and he still tried to end their lives. Because Randall didn't kill for gain, he killed for pleasure. He didn't need a reason, he was the reason. And sometimes, in the Appalachian dark, where cell surface fails and the trees stretch for miles, people like Randall are still out there, smiling, friendly, waiting for the fire to die down and watching you fall to sleep. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I was 26 years old the first time I hiked the Appalachian Trail alone. It was the summer of '89. Before GPS, before cell phones, just me, a compass, and the kind of youthful arrogance that makes you believe nothing can go wrong. Back then, I lived in Rhode Island, a beautiful state, but small, too small. I'd already exhausted every local trail worth hiking, and I wanted something raw, wilder. The Appalachian Trail was a rite of passage among serious hikers. My uncle had done the whole thing back in the 50s and never stopped bragging about it. Made it sound like some sacred pilgrimage. I couldn't get the time off work to do the whole trail, but I figured 2 weeks would be enough to knock out the southern portion, from Harper's Ferry down to the Blue Ridge Mountains, ending in Asherville. That would be my tribute, my challenge. I set out with everything I thought I'd need: food, a map, and a lightweight hammock. Something I could string up between trees to keep me off the ground at night. Safer from the bugs, the damp, or so I thought. The first few days were brutal. Long heights, blistering heat, and an exhaustion that reached down into my bones. But the solitude, that was the real reward. There's something almost spiritual about walking alone through endless trees. Like the forest knows secrets it only whispers when you're quiet enough to listen. But then came that night, the one I don't talk about often, the one I still dream about 30-something years later. It started like any other. I set up my hammock at dusk, somewhere deep in West Virginia, No one around for miles. I remember the quiet, the wrong kind of quiet. Not peaceful, but heavy, like the trees were holding their breath. I woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of leaves shifting, not rustling in the wind, footsteps. I shifted slightly, peeking over the edge of the hammock, and I froze. Just beyond the tree line stood a figure, a man, perfectly still, no flashlight, no gear, no expression, just standing there, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I didn't think. I rolled out of the hammock and ran. No shoes, no gear, just pure instinct driving my legs into the dark. I must have run 100 yards before I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I waited, listened, no footsteps behind me, no sounds at all. Eventually, I crept back towards my camp. My hands were shaking as I scanned the trees. My gear was untouched, no sign of him. It was like he'd vanished. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted me to come back, that this was part of something, a test, a game. I packed up fast and I hiked through the night until I found a new spot, but after that, I couldn't sleep right. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves, my brain screamed, he's back. I brought fishing line in a small trail town a few days later, set up makeshift tripwires with old tin cans that clattered when touched. Primitive alarms. It gave me some peace of mind, until one night a fox set them off and I leapt out with a knife in my hand, only to find it was a curious animal. I laughed it off, but I never slept with the knife again. Too dangerous, too easy to make a fatal mistake in panic. About a week passed. I was 100 miles from that first campsite and started to feel normal again. The paranoia had faded until the night something worse happened. I woke up unable to move. The fabric of my hammock was tight across my chest, my arms pinned to my sides. Something had cocooned me, wrapped the hammock closed with cord or wire. I couldn't breathe right. I couldn't scream. Then I heard it. Leaves dragging. The sound of fabric scraping against dirt. I was being pulled. Someone had cut the hammock down and was dragging me, still inside it, across the forest floor. I panicked, thrashed, screamed, but the material was thick and my voice was muffled. No one could hear me, no one would come, and I had no knife, no flashlight, nothing. Then, I remembered something. My dad had given me an old wristwatch. The clasp had a sharp metal edge, dull, but enough to nick skin if you weren't careful. I twisted my wrist, fumbling with fingers that barely worked, found the latch, pressed it against the fabric, soared. The seconds felt like hours. I heard footsteps behind me, measured and calm. Whoever was dragging me wasn't in a rush. They were enjoying it. But eventually, moonlight. I saw it peeking through the shredded fabric. I tore and ripped until my arm came free, then my chest. Then I burst out of the hammock like something being born again. Cold, screaming and running for my life. I don't know how I escaped. I didn't look back. Eventually, I found a house. Lights on, front porch glowing like salvation. I banged on the door until someone answered. They let me in, called the sheriff, took me in like I was a stray. When the sheriff came the next morning, I told him everything, every awful detail. He nodded slowly, said maybe I had a bad dream, maybe I got tangled and panicked. But I know someone was out there. Someone had tracked me for 100 miles. Someone was waiting, who watched, who dragged me into the dark and wanted to see what happened next. I never finished the trail, took a bus back north and never spoke about it again. Not until years later, when I told my uncle, and he didn't laugh, didn't scoff. He just looked at me for a long time and said, Some of those mountains don't belong to us. They are places out there the maps don't warn you about, and people who never come back down." Then he said something I'll never forget. "The trees out there, they keep secrets, and they never forget your face." If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others, hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. Her trail name was Inchworm, not because she was weak or afraid, but because she moved with purpose, slowly, steadily, 1 mile at a time. Geraldine Largay was 66 years old when she decided to hike the Appalachian Trail. Nearly 1,000 miles of wilderness, starting in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. For many, it was a bucket list challenge, but Geraldine, it was something deeper. She'd been married for over 40 years, a devoted nurse, a woman who had always cared for others. Now, for once, she was doing something for herself. She walked with a close friend, Jane Lee. Her husband, George, followed along in their car, meeting them at intervals to deliver supplies, fresh clothes, or a quick night in a motel. For weeks, it went perfectly. Then Jane had to leave the trail unexpectedly, and Geraldine chose to continue alone. Those who knew her would later say she wasn't best with directions, that she sometimes flustered when trails became tricky, but she was determined, stubborn even. Somewhere deep in Maine, in one of the wildest, least forgiving stretches of the trail, Geraldine stepped off the path, maybe to use the bathroom, maybe to scout a shortcut. Whatever the reason, she never found her way back. The forest swallowed her whole. She had no GPS, no way to mark her position, but she had a notebook, small and black, where she documented every day of her journey. Even after she became lost, she kept writing. She texted George, "Lost since yesterday, off trail 3 or 4 miles, call please, what do I do?" The messages never sent. There was no signal, just that cruel little "sending failed" icon blinking over and over in the corner of the screen, as if mocking her. She wrote another text, "In some trouble, lost, need help." Again, not delivered. Geraldine did everything right. She didn't panic. She searched for high ground. She tied a silver blanket between 2 trees to signal rescue teams. She rationed her food. She waited, but help never came, and no one saw her. Rescue teams flooded the areas, helicopters, search dogs, trail crews, but they never saw the silver blanket. The forest canopy was too dense. Her campsite, tucked between fir trees and underbrush, was invisible from the sky. Volunteers passed within a mile of her location, likely closer, and never realized it. She was right there, and yet utterly alone. False tips began to pour in. Psychics claimed she'd been kidnapped. Some said she drowned. Others accused George of foul play. Time was wasted. Focus was lost. Meanwhile, Geraldine was dying, not in a single violent moment, but in slow increments, a little colder each night, a little weaker each morning, a little more invisible. Her final journal entries were clear and heartbreakingly calm. "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Kerry. It will be the greatest kindness. Let them know I am dead and where you found me." She had waited 26 days, alone, cold, hope flickering like the last light in the long hallway. When her body was finally discovered, 2 years later, she was still inside her sleeping bag. The campsite was pristine. Her belongings were neatly arranged. There was no sign of panic, no violence, no chaos. She had died as she lived, orderly, quiet, dignified, and utterly unseen. People like to imagine the wild is tamed now, that with GPS and cell towers and satellites overhead, no one can simply disappear. But Geraldine Largay did. in one of the most hiked trails in America, in a country that prides itself on never losing people. And the part that stays with me the most, she was less than a mile from rescue, close enough to hear footsteps, close enough that searchers might have unknowingly passed her by, their eyes facing forward, never looking to the side. She was there. The forest knew. It just didn't tell. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I grew up in North Carolina. Back when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout. Back when that still meant campfires, rope knots, and memorizing how to read moss on trees. We'll go on hikes, learn survival skills, fish in cold rivers, and sleep under the stars without ever worrying about what might be sleeping beside us. At least, most of the time. There was one summer trip deep in the Smoky Mountains that I'll never forget, and not because of the views or the s'mores, but because something out there watched us that night, and I still don't know if it was real. It was the third night of our week-long campout. We were huddled around a fire, the air thick with smoke and mosquito repellent, when one of our scoutmasters, an old mountain guy named Ray, decided to tell us a local legend. "You boys ever heard of Spearfinger?" He had our attention. "She walks these mountains," he said. "Older stones, skin like granite, one long, sharp finger on her right hand, sharp enough to stab clean through a tree or a person, doesn't matter." Ray's voice dropped to a whisper. "She takes the shape of your loved ones, your grandma, your favourite aunt, the kind of voice that sings you to sleep, right before she slides that finger between your ribs and pulls out your liver." A few of the younger kids giggled nervously. "Cherokee legends say her heart's hidden in the palm of her hand, so no weapon can kill her. She walks at dusk, alone, and if the birds go silent in the trees, it means she's close." We laughed it off, like you do when you're 13 and pretending to be tough. But something about that story clung to me. That image of a silent, stone-skinned woman drifting through the pines, pretending to be your family, singing lullabies with bloody lips. It got in my head. That night, after lights out, I lay in my tent wide awake, listening. Every branch that snapped outside made me flinch. I whispered to my tent mate, but he was already snoring. Then I heard it. A hiss. Soft, like wind through dry leaves, but slower, more intentional. And then I saw it. A silhouette moved outside the tent, tall and thin. It didn't shuffle like a raccoon or skitter like a fox. It walked. Human-shaped. It paused, raised an arm. I saw one long, pointed finger touch the side of the tent, tracing the fabric in slow circles. Then it whispered, "Huelasiko," the Cherokee word for liver. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My entire body locked up like stone. Then, the zipper. It started to slide open. That snapped something inside me. I screamed so loud I thought my lungs would burst. I crashed through the flap of the tent, tore into the darkness, screaming that Spearfinger had come to eat us alive. I expected chaos, screams, tents flying open, panic everywhere, but all I heard was laughter. One of the older scouts, Devin, was on the ground, red-faced and wheezing, holding up a stick taped to his finger like some makeshift monster claw. He'd snuck around while we were sleeping. He even learned the Cherokee phrase from a book in the ranger station. It was all just a prank. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what we all told ourselves. But here's the part I never shared. Later that night, when the fire had burned down to coals, I went to grab my flashlight from the edge of the camp. That's when I heard it again, just once, behind me in the trees. The same whisper, "Huele seco." I turned. No one was there. Devin was still in his tent, and above me, every bird in the canopy had gone silent. Some things in the mountains don't care if you believe in them. They've been watching far longer than we've been telling stories, and sometimes they listen. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. My name is Lena. I'm from Malaysia, and the moment I thought I was going to die was in Virginia. It happened during a summer school program at Virginia Tech. There were field trips every weekend, and one afternoon, a small group of us hiked part of the Appalachian Trail with a local guide. We were told it was a beginner route, nothing dangerous, just scenery and silence. We didn't know silence could be dangerous. It was stiffingly hot, no wind, the kind of heat that makes your clothes stick and your mind drift. We hiked for hours, stopping occasionally to catch our breath, drink lukewarm water, or snap a few photos of the trees. At one point, we sat on a log, sharing snacks, crackers, fruit, bits of trail mix. That's when we heard it, a low rustling in the brush just a few yards off the trail. I looked at our guide. This man had been cocky and cheerful all afternoon, and saw his face drain of colour. "Don't move," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." I froze. The brush parted, and something stepped out. A black bear, full grown, muscular, silent. It didn't roar, didn't charge, it just walked into our clearing, like it had always been there, like we were the visitors. It sniffed the air once, then turned directly towards me. Time fractured. I remember the bear walking, slow, deliberate, right up to where I sat. I remember the sweat beading on my skin, not from the heat anymore, but from the sheer terror. And I remember how it rose onto its hind legs. It towered above me. It looked into me. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My mind screamed, but my body had locked up. It sniffed at my hijab. Closer, closer. I could feel its breath on my face, hot and wild and ancient. It could have ended me right there, but it didn't. It lowered itself back to all fours, moved on to my friend, Sol. She had frozen too, mouth trembling, holding a half-eaten sandwich in one hand. She let it fall. The bear sniffed the food, ignored it, then stood up again, right in front of her, snuffling at her face and neck. For a moment, it looked like it might, but then it turned, walked back into the forest as quietly as it had come. The silence that followed was unbearable. Pardon the pun. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was my pulse hammering in my ears and the faintest whisper of leaves rustling where the bear had vanished. We didn't cheer, we didn't breathe easy. We just slowly, nimbly packed our things and followed the guide back to the trailhead. I don't remember the hike back. I only remember what the guide said once we reached the van. "It didn't see us as a threat or a meal. We were lucky. That's all it ever is out here. Just luck." People don't realise how quiet death can be, how slowly it can walk right up to you. No growling, no violence, just the sense that you've lost control, that something bigger, older, and far less emotional now decides what happens to you. That day, the bear chose not to kill us, and I still don't know why. The Appalachian Trail stretches for over 2,000 miles, but the real distance is measured in the stories people leave behind. Some come back with photos and memories, others don't come back at all. If these stories haunted you like they did me, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which one disturbed you the most. And if you want more tales of real life horror, strange disappearances and forgotten legends, subscribe to Blighty Nightmares, where darkness walks on two legs and the wild still whispers. I'll be waiting. I first heard the whistling in mile marker 422. It didn't come from the woods above, it came from the ground beneath my tent. My name's Kyle. I was 26 when this happened. I've been hiking the Appalachian Trail alone for 18 days. My plan was to cover the southern section from Georgia to Tennessee, just over 300 miles. I wasn't new to backpacking and I took the whole thing seriously. GPS watch, food packs, bear bags, even a satellite beacon for emergencies. The nights were cold, the blisters real, but the peace was unlike anything back in the city. Out there, time stretches in weird ways. You notice things, wind currents, cloud weight, how pine needles change sound when they fall. I made good time by day, then camped alone at night. No service, no signal, just me, my tent and the mountain silence. It was my 6th night when I chose a spot near mile marker 422. It was flat, isolated and far from the usual shelters. I wanted peace, but what I got instead was company. It started like this. I just crawled into my sleeping bag, zipped tight, reading an old trail guide by headlamp light. Then I heard it, a whistle, but not from the trees, from beneath me. 3 slow notes, like someone humming through cracked lips. It reverberated through the dirt, subtle, muffled, like someone buried alive while exhaling upwards. I froze. You ever hear a sound that doesn't belong to any part of nature, you know? That was it. I pressed my ear to the tent floor. The noise had stopped. I told myself it was nothing, the wind, a pipe dream. And then, as I rolled onto my side, I felt pressure under my back, like the ground had slightly pushed upwards, like something had shifted. I didn't sleep well that night, and the next morning I packed fast. Something about the clearing felt wrong. The way the trees angled inwards, the silence of the birds, the absence of prints, no animal tracks, no bugs, but mine weren't the only boot prints anymore. Next to where my tent had been, parallel to my own, I saw a new trail of shallow indents, fresh, human-sized, but deeper at the heel, no tread, like someone had stood, then dragged. That night, I kept hiking after sundown, just to put distance behind me. By 11:40 PM, I was too exhausted to go further. I set up camp on a ridgeline near a cliff face, and as I unrolled my mat, I found a note inside my pack, folded, creased, on faded paper. I heard it too. That's all it said, in handwriting that wasn't mine. That night, the whistling came back, this time louder. Same 3-note tune, same broken rhythm. But now it wasn't muffled, now it was close. Not under the ground, but at the edge of the cliff. I unzipped the tent slowly, cold air rushed in, and standing maybe 30 feet away, not moving, not speaking, but staring right at me, was a man. No pack, no gear, no shoes. Just a dark coat, long and dirty, like he'd clawed through the rock to get there. His mouth was pulsed, he whistled once more, then turned and walked straight off the cliff. I radioed for help at sunrise, used my beacon, waited 6 hours. I got a message back from the park services. No reports, no missing hikers, no recent deaths. They told me I was likely sleep deprived, maybe even hallucinating. but the cliff had a ledge, right? Maybe he survived. I checked. There was no ledge. Only one thing at the bottom. A hole. A vertical opening maybe 3 feet wide, like a bore shaft, natural but deep. And at the edge, a boot print, pressed hard into the mud, toes facing inwards like someone had jumped. 2 days later, I reached Shelter 42, a halfway rest cabin used by thru hikers. It had a logbook inside. Most entries were cheerful. March 20th, 12 miles today, feet ache, 18 Fahrenheit but bear free. March 21, met hikers from Maine, shared whiskey. But then I saw a page near the back, torn and damp, in faint pencil, someone had scrawled. I heard it under my tent. I saw him at the cliffs. It follows the loners. It doesn't walk, it burrows. Then, the whistling only stops when you speak its name, but I don't know it. The next 3 pages had been torn out. I stayed with a small group of hikers for 2 nights after that. Safety in numbers. I didn't mention what I'd seen. But on night 10, I heard the whistle again, even surrounded by others. Same 3 notes, same rhythm. And when I opened my tent flap to check, everyone else was asleep. But one man, the guy from the previous night, Kevin, was standing barefoot in the middle of the clearing, eyes closed, mouth open, and whistling. The same tune. I called his name. Nothing. I grabbed his shoulder. He jerked awake, like from a trance. He had no idea he even left his tent. That morning, we found new signs in the trees. White blazes, normally used to mark the Appalachian Trail, had been scratched out, replaced with symbols, circles within circles, 3 dashes, spiral marks made with what looked like charcoal or blood. Only I noticed them. Only I felt the air shift when I passed. And at the next trail fork, there was a mirror nailed to a tree. A pocket mirror, small, weather-worn, with something written in the corner in Sharpie. It wears your shape if you leave your body too long. 3 days later, I reached a cave off the main trail. I was trying to avoid it. I really was. But something drew me towards it. It wasn't on any map, but I knew it was where the man had jumped. The hole at the cliff base. It led here. Inside, darkness, shallow water, old bones, and a wall of scratched messages. Don't sleep on soft earth. It watches from below. It's always been here. I turned to leave, and then I heard my own voice, whispering, "You shouldn't have come back." I ran, hard, but I wasn't alone anymore. The whistling chased me, echoed between stone walls. I reached the surface panting, lungs torn open by the cold air. But when I checked my tent that night, there were 2 sleeping bags, both zipped, both warm, and both had muddy footprints inside. Only one was mine. The other, still zipped, still warm, and empty. They never found me. They found someone who looked like me, wearing my coat, carrying my gear. But it wasn't me. I'm still out here, still hearing the whistle, still trying to remember what name I said to make it stop. Because ever since that night, when I breathe in too deep, I whistle. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I thought it was a mapped rest shelter on the Appalachian Trail, but when I stepped inside, the food was already warm. I'd been hiking solo for 12 days when I found cabin 13. The plan was simple: take 6 weeks off work, clear my head, and hike the AT in stretches. I was carrying 38 pounds of gear, a GoPro clipped to my chest, and a digital topo map preloaded with shelters and water refill points. It was mid-April, chilly but beautiful. The fog rolled in soft some mornings like a whisper. My phone didn't work this deep into the Smokies, and I liked it that way. The trail was quiet, eerily so. Not many through hikers yet this season, and I hadn't seen another person in nearly 2 days. My legs ached, my rations were low, and when I saw the "shelter ahead" sign carved into a blackened post, I felt relieved. Only, I didn't remember this stop from the maps. A narrow offshoot trailed through dense pine and mist. I followed it down into a shallow hollow, and there it was. A single room cabin. Shingled roof, small chimney, a porch with a rocking chair that creaked softly in the wind. No signage, no marker, but I was exhausted and it looked inviting. That's when I noticed the number carved above the doorframe, 13. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The hinges groaned and the smell hit me immediately. Wood smoke, pine, and something else, like stew. I stepped inside cautiously. The interior was strangely intact. A bedroll was neatly made in the far corner. A pot simmered gently on an iron stove in the centre. No one was inside. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Maybe a ranger outpost, an old hunter's shack. I wanted to believe that, but something didn't sit right. I set down my pack, glanced around again, and I found something even stranger. A second pair of boots, dry, upright, by the door. They weren't mine. I backed out, heart thudding, but no one came. I waited, 10 minutes, then 20. The food in the pot was still hot. There was no radio, no power, no obvious signs anyone had been inside recently, and yet there was warmth, and that's when I noticed the journal. It was leather-bound, dusty, but not old. Inside were entries from someone named Ben, just dates and brief logs. Day 3, saw bear tracks. Day 5, heard whistling again, came from the trees. Day 8, shelter ahead. Finally, I flipped it to the last page. Day 11, found the cabin. Number 13, food already cooking. No one home. Stayed anyway. My blood ran cold. That exact thing had just happened to me. I looked again. The date on the entry? 4 days ago. I should have left. I should have packed up and walked back to the trail. Darkness be damned. But I didn't. I rationed the stew, rolled out my mat, and settled in as the sun dipped behind the trees. The wind moaned outside. A branch tapped against the window rhythmically. I turned off my headlamp and tried to sleep. At 2:14 a.m, I woke up. The rocking chair on the porch was moving, not swaying gently, but rocking hard. I lay frozen, listening. There was no wind, no footsteps, just that steady creak. I got up, heart pounding, and peeked through the small square window. The chair was still, completely still, but I could have sworn. Then I saw the boots. My boots. They'd been by the door. Now, they were facing the bed, as if someone had stood in them while I slept. I left at first light. No breakfast, no coffee, just shoved everything back in my bag and got out. But when I reached the trail junction, the path was gone. I retraced my steps, circled, used GPS. Nothing. The trail no longer existed. Cabin 13 sat behind me, exactly where it was, unchanged. Panicked, I decided to search the cabin for supplies, clues, anything. That's when I noticed the door. A second door. Small, waist high, near the floor behind the stove. I hadn't seen it before. I opened it. It was pitch black inside, a crawl space, dirt floor. Something scuttled back into the shadows. I shone my light in. There were carvings on the walls, hundreds of them, numbers, 13, 13, 13, over and over. And bones, tiny bones like rodents maybe. No, they weren't all animals. I saw a child's shoe, half buried. That night I made a fire outside and stayed awake. At 3:12 a.m, I heard it. A knock. Not on the front door, not on the cabin wall. It came from inside the crawl space. A knock, knock, knock. Then a voice, faint, raspy, female. "Don't answer." I froze. Then again, louder. "Don't answer the door." I backed away. The knocking grew faster. A knock, 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 until I suddenly stopped, and I was alone again. I don't remember collapsing, but I must have. I woke up in a rescue tent. Apparently, a park ranger had found me wandering half a mile from the main trail, delirious, no shoes, repeating something over and over. He handed me my bag. Inside, a journal, still open to the last page. Only now, the last entry had changed. It read, "I kept answering the door, but no one ever knocked, and my boots never recovered." Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear it again, the knock, and the voice that follows, "Don't answer the door." I never do, but one day, I think I will. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I went off grid to hike the Appalachian Trail alone, but I wasn't alone. Someone followed me for 6 days, and they never made a sound. I'd always romanticized the idea of a long, solitary hike. I was 29, burned out from city life, and single again after a brutal breakup. So I told my job I needed a sabbatical, packed my gear, and I flew down to North Carolina to hike the southern section of the Appalachian Trail, solo. Start near Climman's Dome, go light, cover 70 miles in a week, and lose myself in the trees. I wasn't looking for enlightenment or some grand transformation. I just wanted silence, and I got it for the first 2 days. Those first few miles were exactly what I hoped for. Crisp morning air, the damp scent of moss and earth, old growth trees groaning softly in the wind. No traffic, no voices, no digital noise. But on the third night, everything changed. It was just past midnight when I heard the first crackle of dried twigs outside of my tent. I froze. There are plenty of animals in the Smokies, bears, bobcats, coyotes, but this didn't sound like an animal. No sniffing, no pawing. It was 2 precise crunches, then silence. I lay there, holding my breath for what felt like hours. Then I reached for the zipper and peeked out. Nothing. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or a deer, but the pit in my gut didn't believe it. Midway through the next day, I reached a small clearing to refill my water. That's when I noticed it. A pile of stones arranged in a circle. 5 stones, each balanced perfectly on the next, like a crude totem. Weird, but hikers leave strange markers all the time, so I ignored it. That night, I set up camp near a bend in the trail. It was remote, cold, so I built a fire and I cooked some instant rice. But the whole time, I had this gnawing sensation, like I was being watched. When I turned in for the night, I zipped my tent tight and I kept my headlamp nearby, just in case. I woke up to footprints, not animal tracks, bare human footprints leading from the edge of the trees to my tent. They were fresh, still damp with morning dew, no shoes, just skin on dirt. But here's the worst part. They stopped inches from the flap of my tent and then turned back. They didn't circle the tent, didn't wander off in different directions, just came and left. I didn't move for hours. When I finally packed up and started hiking, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The prints were too large to be a child, too narrow to be a hiker, and who the hell hikes the Appalachian Trail barefoot? I passed one hiker that afternoon, an old man with a white beard and a limp. I considered telling him what I saw, but something stopped me. He gave me a long, hollow look as we passed, like he already knew. That night, I skipped camping and headed straight to one of the old trail shelters. 3 walls and a roof, usually with a fire ring and a log bench outside. When I got there, it looked abandoned, like no one had stayed in it for years. Moss covered the stone, the logbook was gone, but there were fresh scratches in the wooden beams, long, carved gouges like fingernails. I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m, I heard whistling, low, rhythmic, coming from somewhere deep into the forest. And I swear to you, I recognised the tune. It was a lullaby my mum used to hum when I was little. Something I hadn't heard since I was 8 years old. That broke me. I curled up in my sleeping bag, my knife in hand, tears stinging my eyes. Not from fear, but from confusion. Who the hell was out there? How did they know that melody? I didn't sleep at all. I woke up the next day to a pile of stones again, this time inside the shelter, right at the foot of my bag. 5 stones, stacked in a perfect spiral. That was it. I bolted. I didn't eat, I didn't pack properly. I just grabbed my essentials and ran. Every few minutes, I'd hear branches cracking behind me, or I'd see a figure shift between the trees. But every time I turned around, nothing. Then I saw it. A figure, 50 meters back, tall, naked, covered in mud and black paint, standing perfectly still, like he'd been carved from the forest itself. When I moved, he moved. I sprinted. I don't know how long I ran, only that by late afternoon I hit a service road. A couple in a pickup stopped when they saw me waving like a lunatic. They drove me into town, and when I told the ranger what's happened, he looked at me like I was crazy. "There's no shelter out there," he said. "That trail's been closed for 10 years. Fire wiped it out." I didn't argue, I just nodded and left. A week later, I was unpacking when I found something strange at the bottom of my rucksack. A small, flat stone, carved with 5 tiny notches. I didn't put it there, and I haven't hiked alone since. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. People always think they understand the woods, that if you've got a map, a good pair of boots, and a full battery, you'll be fine. But once you leave the trail, really leave it, you'll find there are places that don't want to be known. And if you keep going, sometimes they let you in anyway. In the fall of 2017, 4 of us decided to go on a backwoods camping trip in Kentucky, deep in Clay County. It wasn't part of the official Daniel Boone National Forest, it was an unmarked area north of Redbird. No cell service, no rangers, no groomed trails, just acres of dense pine, rocky hollows, and old stories that no one tells unless you're from there. We weren't. It was me, Josh, my girlfriend Liv, and two of our college friends, Marcus and Tori. We were all 24, used to short hikes and national park camping, but nothing like this. We heard about the spot through a guy on a Reddit hiking forum. He wouldn't say much except it's the most peaceful place you'll ever find. Just stay near the creek and don't go past the second ridge. That should have been a red flag, but we figured it was a locals only thing, territorial, secret fishing spots, that kind of vibe. We left our cars at a pull-off just outside of Manchester and hiked with packs. The forest was thick, dense trees that seemed older than the land around them. The air was still, too still. After 2 hours, we found the creek he mentioned. Cold, fast moving water with a steep rock wall on one side and a mossy flat on the other. It was beautiful, yeah, but even then, something felt off. Like we weren't alone, even though we hadn't seen a single person since the gravel road. We set up camp, built a fire, cracked open beers and talked under the stars. Then, around 9:40 PM, we heard it. Whistling. Just 3 notes, long, low, rising. It came from the trees across the creek. We all froze. Marcus chuckled nervously. Someone out there? We called out. No answer. Then a few seconds later, from our left, the same 3 notes. Closer. Liv whispered, "Is that a bird?" It wasn't. There was a pause, a weird, heavy pause, like the whole forest held its breath. Then, to our right, the same whistle. That triangle of sound, one across the creek, one left, one right, surrounded us. I stood up and yelled, "Hey, we're just camping, we don't want trouble." Nothing, just wind in the trees. We didn't sleep well. In the morning, Liv and Tori wanted to leave. Marcus said we were fine, and I was on the fence. Around noon, we saw our first person, an old man in a busted truck, slowly driving the gravel trail near where we parked. He stopped and rolled down the window. "You kids in the woods?" We nodded. He shook his head. "Ain't wise, not this far back." "Why?" I asked. "Something we should know." He stared at us for a long time, then said, "You don't talk, they whistle. If you hear it again, don't whistle back." And he drove off. We decided to stay one more night, just to prove we weren't spooked. Dumbest decision of my life. That night, it started again, whistling. Same pattern, same triangle. Only this time, it moved, circled us, slowly. We sat frozen around the fire. The sound would vanish, then return from a new direction. Always 3 notes, always the same tone. Liv said her name, just once, and the whistling stopped. That silence was worse than the sound. Then, on the edge of the tree line, we saw someone. Only for a second, just a pale face, no shirt, just standing there, watching. Then it was gone. Tori started crying, and Marcus whispered, "We're leaving at dawn." No one argued. The next morning, the trail we took in wasn't there. I'm not kidding. The orange markers we tied to branches, gone. The downed birch tree we stepped over, not there anymore. It's like the forest had moved. We followed the creek downstream, hoping it would lead back to the road. It should have. Instead, it narrowed, turned rocky, and led us to a dead hollow, a wide basin of grey trees and rotten stumps. At the centre was a structure. Maybe once a cabin, now just a foundation of stones, and carved into one of the stones, 3 vertical slashes. That night, we tried not to light a fire. It didn't matter. The whistling came anyway, from every direction. Fast now, urgent, mocking. Tori broke. She screamed into the dark, "What do you want?" A moment later, we heard a whistle. Her exact scream mimicked in whistling form. It was the most wrong sound I've ever heard, like someone took her voice and twisted it through a flute made of bone. We ran. We ran until we couldn't anymore. Found a clearing with an old hunting blind and crashed there. At sunrise, we heard a motor, the sound of a quad. A local hunter spotted us and drove us out. He didn't ask what happened. All he said was, "Y'all lucky. Ain't many come out once they start whistling." Liv still won't talk about it. She won't go near the woods anymore. Tori moved back to New Jersey. Marcus, he went back a year later, alone. He never came back. I've been hiking alone for over a decade, from Colorado to Catskills, and nothing ever made me question that decision until West Virginia, specifically Monongahela National Forest, near a place called Spruce Knob. It's remote, rugged and breathtaking, but just off the main trails are vast stretches of woodland that even rangers admit they haven't mapped completely. Old coal routes, they said, private logging land, just don't go too far off. I wish I listened. It was early October 2021. I'd taken time off work and wanted a few days in nature before winter. The plan was simple: 2 nights on a loop trail near Seneca Creek, solo camping with GPS, topographical maps and an offline trail app. I parked at the trailhead and hiked around 7 miles in the first day. The air was crisp, leaves just starting to change. I passed one couple heading out and I didn't see another soul the rest of the day. Around 4 PM, I found a perfect camp spot near the water. I set up my tent, cooked dinner and read until nightfall. That night was calm. No weird noises, no bad vibes. That came later. Around 11 AM the next morning, I broke camp and continued down the loop. I was supposed to head east, but somewhere along the way, I missed the marker. My GPS showed me about half a mile off course, but I wasn't worried. I could see I was close to where I needed to be. Then, I reached a crossroad. Not on the map, not on GPS, just a narrow path heading north, flanked by 2 upright stones that looked deliberate, carved, weathered. I stopped. The air felt different there, cooler, stiller, like sound didn't carry right. The forest was absolutely silent. I don't know why I did it, curiosity, maybe, or the way the path seemed inviting. So I turned onto the trail and walked north. After 20 minutes, the woods began to thin. Then I saw it. A town. Tiny, maybe a dozen buildings, all wooden and sagging with age. A church with a broken steeple, a general store with boarded windows, a large house at the far end with a wraparound porch and lanterns hung from its beams. There were no cars, no wires, no paved roads. It looked like something out of the 1800s. But here's the thing, it didn't look abandoned. There were curtains in the windows, smoke coming from one of the chimneys, a stack of chopped wood by the general store. Then I saw a man, middle-aged, wearing faded denim and a flannel, standing perfectly still near the porch of the church. He stared at me, then turned and walked inside. I called out, "Hey, is this private land?" No answer, just the wind and the creaking boards. I walked deeper into town, cautiously. The buildings were weathered but solid. I passed the house and saw someone standing inside. A woman, middle-aged, pale, just staring through the window. She didn't wave, didn't move. I knocked on the door of the store. No answer. I looked around again. Now there were 4 people, each standing near different buildings, all watching, non-moving. Then I noticed the identical table set outside several homes, each with 2 chairs, each with a plate, a fork and a glass, all empty but clean, like they were waiting for something or someone. I left quickly. The path I took in, it wasn't there anymore. I retraced my steps and ended up back at the same crossroad. I walked the perimeter of the town twice. Every way I turned, the woods just curved back towards the buildings. I tried GPS, dead. Compass, spinning. Phone, no signal, of course. But my battery dropped from 62% to 10 in minutes. I stayed at the edge of the town as the sun began to fade, debating whether to sleep in the woods. Then a bell rang from the church, low and metallic, just once. Every resident of the town turned to face the sound, and then, together, they turned to face me. I ran through the woods, over rocks. I scraped my hands and knees and I ran until my lungs burned. I found a dry hollow under a pine grove and huddled there with my knife in my hand. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps, crunching leaves, moving slowly, then stopping, then the faint sound of someone breathing. I held my breath. After a while, it moved on. At sunrise, I made one more push back to the town. It was empty. I found an old journal inside the large house. Its pages were brittle but legible. The last entry was dated 1901. We remain as 12. We prepare the table for 13. The traveller who strays becomes the guest becomes the kept. There were pages before that, but they'd been torn out. I left it on the floor and got out of there. This time, the trail was back. When I got back to my car, a ranger was there, said he was checking a fire report. I asked him about the town, described what I'd seen. He went quiet, then said, "You must have been near old Wheatley, logging town, burned down in 1912. Ain't nothing there now but stone and ash." I showed him the photo I took of the porch table. It was gone, replaced by a black screen. I tried to go back 2 months later. Same trailhead, same GPS route. The path, gone. No stones, no crossroad, just empty woods. But sometimes, when I hike alone now, I see something out of place. A faint column of smoke in the distance, a shadow in the trees, and once, a perfectly set table for two. I met Sarah on the Appalachian Trail, spring of 2019. She was through hiking southbound, and I was doing a short, solo stretch through North Carolina. We ran into each other near Mac's Patch, shared a fire, swapped stories, and decided to keep hiking together for a while. By day 3, I knew I didn't want to hike without her again. We moved in together that fall, small place in Asheville, and spent the next few years planning weekend hikes and trail runs through the Smokies and Pisgah. She was fearless, loved the solitude. The deeper we were in, the happier she was. But something happened in 2023 that neither of us could explain. Something that took her from me, or maybe brought something back in her place. It was supposed to be simple. 2 nights in the Joyce Kilmer Slick Rock Wilderness, off trail, through an old ridgeline Sarah had been wanting to bushwhack for a while. Remote, dense, beautiful. We set up camp the first night near an old fire ring off a faint animal trail. No one around for miles, just us, the trees, and the wind moving through like it had a purpose. That night, I woke up to Sarah sitting bolt upright in the tent. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "What?" "Someone's calling for help." I sat up and listened. Silence. She unzipped the tent and stepped out into the dark. I grabbed my flashlight and followed. And then, we both heard it. A voice. Distant, male, weak. "Help! Help me!" It came from the trees west of us, downhill, deep. Sarah looked at me. "We can't ignore that." But something in me said we should. Still, she started walking. We followed the voice for maybe 10 minutes, careful with each step. Then it stopped. Dead silence. We waited. A few minutes later, the voice came again. Only this time, it sounded closer than it should have been, and wrong. Like someone pretending to be in pain. Please, help me. Only now, it sounded familiar, almost like Sarah's own voice. That's when we both stopped. Did that sound like me? She asked, almost laughing, but it wasn't funny. Let's go back, I said. We turned around, but the trail we followed, gone. We searched for any sign of our original path. Nothing. Every tree looked the same, the moss, the bark, the slope. It was like the forest had shifted. Then we heard it again. Sarah. Soft, from behind a tree, but not through the tree. It sounded inside them, as if the bark itself were speaking. Then another voice, mine, said, this way. Only I hadn't said anything. That's when we started running. And after what felt like an hour, we stumbled into a small clearing, a circle of low stumps and dry pine needles. In the centre was a pile of stones with a worn wooden carving on top. It looked like a crude human face with a wide hollow mouth. Sarah stared at it. She whispered, that's a lore marker. A what? I read about them. Appalachian folklore, the whistlers, the mimics, things that lure hikers with voices, sometimes their own. She shivered. I stepped towards her, but she flinched like I wasn't real. We built a fire and huddled by it, barely sleeping. In the early hours, she said she had to pee and walked into the tree line. She didn't come back. I called for her, searched, panicked. Finally, just after dawn, I saw her standing by the clearing. But something was off. She was still. Too still. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. I approached slowly. Sarah? Sarah? She smiled. Not her smile. Too wide, too flat. Then she said, you came back. But in my voice. I screamed, fell backwards and ran. Eventually I made it to the ridge with a faint trail and followed it for hours until I reached a gravel service road. A hunter gave me a lift to the ranger station. They found Sarah a day later, curled up near our original campsite, dehydrated, shaken, but alive. She didn't remember anything past the voice in the trees. It's been 6 months. Sarah's different. She's distant, wakes up at night whispering to someone, talks less, sometimes just stands by the window, listening. And sometimes I hear her voice whisper my name from the backyard, even when she's asleep in bed. Last week, I found her in the woods behind our house. She was standing still, too still, smiling. When I asked her what she was doing, she just said, waiting for the real you to come back. My friend disappeared in front of me, but I kept hearing him calling my name. His voice came from the trees, sometimes from the trail behind me, sometimes from places we haven't even reached yet. And the worst part, I kept answering. This happened in 2022. I was hiking a rugged offshoot of the Appalachian Trail with my friend Brian. We were 2.5 days into a 6-day trip between Hot Springs and Irwin, Tennessee. We weren't hardcore survivalists or anything, but we'd done a dozen trails together, and this one was just remote enough to be exciting. Everything was smooth the first 2 days, clear weather, perfect elevation, and no other hikers in sight. We reached a plateau and set up camp by a ridge. It was quiet, real quiet. But that's what I liked. We made freeze-dried chili, cracked a beer each, and watched the stars appear in dead silence. Just before crashing, Brian looked at me and said, "Hey, don't freak out. If anything happens out here, don't follow voices, even if it sounds like me." I laughed. "What, like banshees?" "No, it's a thing around here," he said. Mimics. People say there's something in the woods that repeat the last words of whoever it took. I rolled my eyes and called him an idiot. He didn't laugh. The next day we passed through a winding switchback trail covered in fallen leaves and sharp descent. The trees got denser, light got thinner. Around 2 p.m, Brian's compass stopped working. Mine too. I joked about magnetic rocks, but it didn't feel funny. We stopped to eat, and I realised we haven't seen a single trail marker in miles. Brian swore he saw a blaze about 50 yards ahead, so he pushed on while I sat and checked the map. That was the last time I saw him. I yelled for him 5 minutes later. No response. I clicked the walkie. Nothing. I kept walking. 20 minutes, 30. Still, no Brian. And then I heard it. Connor. His voice, exactly his voice, from about 40 feet off trail, too far to see. I'm over here. Relief flooded me. I called back. No response. Brian, I hear you. Where are you? Over here, he said again. Same tone, same exact phrasing, over and over. I froze. There was something wrong with it. The cadence, the repetition. He didn't say anything else, just, Connor, I'm over here. Every 30 seconds, and then it came from the other side of the ridge. Connor, I'm over here. I ran, not towards it, away, straight back down the trail, or what I hoped was the trail. My GPS was glitching, there was no signal, and the compass spun like a toy. I kept hearing his voice. Connor, over here. Sometimes behind me, sometimes in front, sometimes both at once. I passed a tree with scratch marks on the bark, long ones, fresh. No claw marks, more like carvings. And when I stopped to check the map again, something brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. No one was there. And then the walkie clicked. Connor, help me. The voice cracked. It's not me. And then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I found a clearing and built a fire too high for backcountry standards. I didn't care. Around 2 a.m, the walkie clicked again. Connor. It was my voice, recorded, repeating what I yelled earlier in the day. Brian, I hear you. Where are you? Then came a low clicking noise, and then static. Then Brian's voice, quieter, trembling. Don't talk back to it. Don't answer it. It learns. I was found 2 days later by a local SAR unit. I had wandered 12 miles off trail. They didn't find Brian. Not a trace. Not even his pack. I gave my report. I left out the mimic part. They wouldn't believe me anyway. But one of the rescuers, an older guy, pulled me aside afterwards. He asked where I heard the voice. I told him. He nodded slowly. Same place another hiker went missing 2 years ago. That guy was calling for his wife over the walkie. For hours. She was already dead. 3 weeks later, a box arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was Brian's walkie. Still on. Still charged. Still whispering. Over here. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But sometimes, when I drive near forest, the walkie in my glove box starts crackling, even when it's turned off. And sometimes, the voice that comes through is mine. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. At 2:16 a.m, something tapped on our tent. At 2:18, it slowly unzipped the door, but there was no one there, just claw marks in the dirt, and a shoe, still warm. This happened in July 2020, peak summer, peak isolation. 3 of us were hiking a lesser known leg of the Appalachian Trail near Rowan Mountain, Tennessee. Me, my cousin Josh, and his friend Brandon. We were taking a 5-day loop with limited access points, no shelters, tent only. The second night, we pitched a camp on a small plateau with a view of the ridgeline. Trees all around, no one else was there, or so we thought. The first sign something was off, the forest was dead quiet. Even at night, you usually hear insects, owls, distant movement, but there was nothing, just stillness. Josh joked about wendigos, trying to lighten the mood, but Brandon, who grew up nearby, went quiet. My granddad used to say if the woods go quiet, something's already watching. At 2:16 a.m, something tapped on our tent. One light knock, then two more, then a slow slide like a hand brushing fabric. I jolted up and looked at Josh. He was awake, so was Brandon. Josh whispered, "Probably a raccoon," but it didn't feel like a raccoon. It felt like a person deliberately brushing their palm across the nylon. The tapping stopped. I held my breath. Then, from the far side of the tent, came a zip. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Someone was unzipping the entrance from the outside. I grabbed my flashlight and unlatched my blade. Josh counted down softly. 3, 2, 1. I ripped the zipper the rest of the way open and shined the light. No one was there, but in the dirt just outside the flap were 4 long claw marks. Not animal scratches, drag marks, like someone had dug their fingers deep. And off to the side was Brandon's boot, sitting alone, still warm inside. We called for him. No answer. Walkie, static. We spread out 50 feet. Nothing. No trail, no sign of struggle, no dropped gear, just his other boot. Josh found it half buried under pine needles with the laces still tied, like it had been placed there. We shouted until our throats hurt, then hiked back to camp, or what we thought was camp. When we reached it, our tent was gone. Gone, like it had never been there. Just a clearing, no fire pit, no gear, no signs we'd ever camped. Except one thing, a drawing, nailed to the tree, charcoal on paper. It showed 3 people sleeping in a tent, and something standing outside it. We found an old trail and hiked fast. Didn't sleep, just moved until sunrise. The path looped us back towards a known shelter waypoint. We thought we were safe. Around 3 p.m, Josh sat down to check his phone. He'd been recording audio overnight, a habit of his since a bear encounter years earlier. We played the clip from 2:16 a.m. The first tap came at 2:16:08. The brushing came at 2:16:41. At 2:18:02, the zipper started sliding. Then, silence for 11 seconds. Then, a sound. Not footsteps, not a voice. It was a sniffing noise. Close, animal-like, but bigger, hungrier. Then came a whisper. "Not him, you." We made it to the trailhead 2 days later. Never found Brandon. We reported him missing. Search teams were deployed, but nothing. Except one ranger found something 400 yards off trail. A tree, clawed deep. At the base, a hat. Brandon's. Still folded like he wore it the night before. Inside the brim, written in what looked like burned in soot, were 3 words. You looked back. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I still don't know what was out there, but sometimes, when I camp near tree lines, I hear 2 taps on the tent, then silence, then my own voice saying, "Not him, you." If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. We were 14 miles into the trail when we found a cabin with the lights on. There were no roads, no driveways, not even a path, and the people inside said the same thing to us, over and over. "You made it, you made it, you made it." But the part that still haunts me, they already had a photo of us, smiling. In October 2021, my girlfriend Taylor and I set out to hike a remote Appalachian loop trail near the Georgia-North Carolina border, somewhere near Nantahala National Forest. She's a travel photographer and I was just helping her scout strange locations for an upcoming Haunted Hikes photo project. Our goal was to spend 4 nights off-grid and photograph anything odd. Abandoned cabins, fire towers, weird carvings, even old logging roads. We were 14 miles deep when we went off trail into what looked like an old homestead clearing. No structures, just mossy flat land and a chimney base overgrown with brush. That's when we saw the cabin. It was 100 feet away, tucked behind cedar and fir trees. Full structure, new looking roof, windows, smoke coming from the chimney. There was no trail to it, no driveway, no ATV ruts, just standing there like it had grown out of the ground. Taylor immediately pulled out her camera. "It's perfect," she said. "No one's gonna believe this is real." We got closer. Through the window, I could see movement. Someone inside, maybe 2 people, shadows. We knocked. The door opened before we touched it, and a woman smiled at us. She looked maybe 60, long grey hair, wore a linen dress and heavy boots. Behind her stood a man with a wide grin and red flannel shirt. "You made it," the woman said. "You made it," the man echoed. Taylor and I looked at each other. She gave me the go with it look. "We weren't expecting to see anyone out here," I said. "No one does," the woman said. She stepped aside. "Come in, supper's hot." Taylor hesitated, but we were starving and still had 3 hours of hiking to our planned camp. We went in. The floor was clean, the cabin smelled like stew. 5 people total, all seated at a heavy wooden table, watching us enter, smiling. Not one person blinked for a solid minute. The food was simple, potatoes, carrots, bread, but it was good, weirdly good. The older man poured us each a cup of something warm that smelled like cinnamon. "You must be tired, you've come a long way," he said. Taylor asked how long they've lived there. They didn't answer directly. The woman across from her, the only one not smiling, finally said, "Long enough to forget what we came here for." Nobody laughed. After dinner, the host asked if we would stay the night. We declined, said we needed to reach a mapped campsite before dark. That's when the younger girl, maybe 12, said something that made me sit up straight. "It's okay, you've already stayed here." Taylor looked confused. I asked what she meant. She pointed towards the fireplace mantel. There was a picture frame, and inside it was a photo of me and Taylor, smiling, standing on the porch of that same cabin. But we hadn't taken that photo. We stood, politely but firmly declined their invitation again. The woman just smiled wider. "You'll be back." We left without looking behind us. Taylor didn't speak for the first half hour of hiking. Neither did I. Eventually, she stopped mid-step and said, "I deleted all the photos of the cabin." I nodded. "Me too." She raised her phone. "I just looked again. They're all still there." We hiked 3 more hours and made camp on a ridge. No sign of the mapped campsite. We were off grid. I kept waking up, thinking I heard voices. Around 2:44 a.m, Taylor shook me awake. "Listen," she whispered. From the woods came footsteps, slow, deliberate, just past the tree line. I clicked on my flashlight. Nothing. No sound, no movement, until a voice whispered, "You made it." We got out the next morning. We didn't speak much, just focus on following trailblazers and ignoring the constant feeling of being watched. Once we reached the car, we swore not to post anything from the trip. 3 days later, Taylor's camera SD card corrupted. She thought everything was gone. Then one image reappeared. It was the cabin, taken from above, like a drone shot, showing us on the porch, smiling, waving, except we never owned a drone, and we never waved. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. We've spoken to each other about what happened that night, but sometimes I dream of that cabin, of the people smiling, of the photo on the mantle, and the last time I woke up, I had mud on my boots.